Are we on? Yes. Are we? I think so.
I think so.
Yes. Hello, Winnipeg Babes. This is the local election podcast preparing you for the resistance and created with the goal of teaching you everything you really didn't want to have to know about local politics. I'm your host, Patty Weens.
And I'm Sam Biko.
Remember, you can support us on Patreon by going to ballotbabes.com and clicking on the Patreon link. By now, you're probably thinking, who do these babes think they are and what makes them qualified to talk about politics?
And, we're wondering the same, but we have the microphone and you don't. So sit down and listen. We don't have time to waste. We have a ton to talk about today. And I also just want to remind all of you out there listening that for our municipal election taking place October 28th, you can listen to our sultry bitching and moaning every single week leading up to the election. And then there will be a couple episodes after, either crying or cheering. So you can rely on us to continue to deliver your play-by-play of committee and council meetings, your roasting where roasting is due, and your general breakdown of how this system works and why your vote matters.
Great. Well, this week we'll be reviewing last week's homework, and then we will be reviewing what happened at City Hall last week with some little videos of some pretty alarming things that the mayor said, as well as my dear counselor, Jeff Brawadi. And actually, we're going to be showing you some pretty amazing delegations as well. So we had some homework for you last week to call into the show, giving some feedback about Winnipeg Transit while you're filling out a form to send the feedback into the city. Congratulations to our listener, Bridget. She's the winner of absolutely nothing but our undivided attention.
And yours.
And yours, yes. Let's see what Bridget had to say.
Hey guys, love the podcast. And you said in your latest episode that you'd love to hear what people have submitted to 311 feedback on the transit service. I've been meaning to submit something lately anyway, so this was just when I needed to finally do it. And this will need to be split into two parts as it got quite wordy, so I'll submit two parts. Here it is. While my main Monday to Friday commute has remained largely unaffected, I've noticed over the past several months that the primary transit network changes have not had a positive effect on the overall availability of the public transit service. I do not own a car and have no current intentions of buying one, as well as no access to a car unless I hire a taxi or rent a vehicle. Therefore, I require transit services to get anywhere in the city regardless of time or day of the week. I'm in the beginning stages of buying a house, and so I'm frequently going to open houses, which are always scheduled on Saturdays or Sundays. It's difficult for me to explore new neighborhoods that I might like to live in when it would take me at least an hour to get there, and would be highly dependent on catching the least frequent bus routes on their least frequent service days. And I believe that bus services should not diminish on Saturdays and Sundays, as shift workers also still rely on them for normal commutes, and people without access to cars would still like to go places on the weekend. I suppose this is a passive holdover from transit scheduling of decades past, rather than a logical decision to decrease services. Hi, this is part two. I don't think that the negative feedback loop of decreased riders on these days is a trustworthy statistic either, without thorough investigation or analysis. I have the same issues with evening schedules. If I don't have a car to take to evening events in other parts of the city, then I'm dependent on infrequent transit services to take me to and from them. It often feels unsafe to wait in the dark for a bus that now only comes every 30 to 40 minutes, or even longer, and people do not always have the option of passing the time safely inside a venue before going out to the bus stop. I'm sure people with cars would also appreciate increased transit service in the evenings, as I hear some of their main complaints are with parking, either availability or price. The public transit service could be the great solution to many problems, and I greatly appreciate public transit in every city that I've lived in, and would happily welcome a diversification of public transit modes in the city. I just need to be able to get to places on the weekend first. Thank you very much for your consideration and your hard work. And thank you, Ballot Babes, for listening.
Thank you so much for calling in. That was really great, Bridget. And thank you for sending this feedback to Transit as well. This is what we talked about in the last episode about how more frequent transit is better than free transit. And things like more frequency only happen with
increased funding. Ding, 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 ding.
So the good news is that your feedback is perfect. The bad news is that it's only going to change once our city changes their spending priorities. Sam, last week we talked about how there's infrastructure costs, which feels like an investment because you see a road and a bridge and that kind of thing. And you're like, oh, this is a thing. We built this. And then there's operating costs, which feel like a burden because you don't really see anything tangible. And it just feels like you're throwing money away every year. And then come next year, you got to be able to find that money and throw it away all over again. But you know what kind of operating costs seem to not bother anyone at City Hall? I mean, they just repeated year after year after year. And then they add some more to this one budget line item. Can you guess what that is, Sam?
I'm really racking my brain because if it's not transit and it's not really like fundamentally improving my daily life, then it must be police, because
you got it.
I sure do see that chopper a lot and all of those like really fancy toys that they have. And I see
tools. They call them tools.
Sorry. But I do also see that line item on the budget increasing every year, because when I first started becoming mentally active in how our city operates, it was only 27%. And what is it this year, Patty?
28.1%. That's actually in 2025. And it's going to be even higher for 2026. Yes, they increased their operating budget by 18.8 million in 2025, reaching 339.3 million. To compare, all of community services got a tiny 3 million increase for an operating budget of 107.2 million. So City Council spends the same amount on the Winnipeg Police Service operations as for all of the following services combined. Okay, here we go. Transit, recreation, parks and natural areas, libraries, urban forestry, active transportation, arts, entertainment, and culture. All of that as much as the police.
That whole list are things that make life in a city worth living. That's what blows my mind. But we never bat an eye on that level of spending for that single service. And when you rock up to City Hall with that complaint, that's another way that you get labeled radical and extreme. And you want to defund the police when it's so unsafe, to be on the bus and to exist in the downtown area. We could have a whole episode about that and about debunking some of those talking points, and we will. But when you see that your experience of your own city is not improving, and the city is constantly saying, we don't have money, there's a little star next to that statement. And underneath it is we don't have money for those things, but for the things that we think are important, the city council, we have boatloads of money for it. And we have tons of talking points as to why you're wrong and we're right. Which is very frustrating, especially when, we've mentioned this time and again, you go and you delegate at a meeting and every single delegation is against something and it doesn't really seem to change anyone's mind.
No,
which is
so
exhausting. And we'll talk more about that in this episode with actual examples that happened recently.
It's crazy because every year they spend more money on the police and yet nothing is better. We're almost at the point where what's going to make it better? A police in every corner, like in military occupied countries. Is that what we want for our city? But I want you to start thinking about that. what is it about operating cost versus infrastructure investments that you need to pay attention to? Okay. And if you paid attention to the last episode, we talked about how some of these investments aren't investments at all. They're more of a liability because of the maintenance costs to keep these up. So here's a question for you. Would you rather have more lanes or more frequent buses in their own dedicated lanes, never stuck in traffic? I know my answer, but I want you to spend some time thinking about yours. Shall we move on?
Yes. Yes, I think it is time for our segment, which I think also needs its own music, which is time to review what happened at the recent show at City Hall. The Executive Policy Committee meeting, which we spoke about at length on the previous episode. It took place on grand old St. Paddy's Day, March 17th. And just to remind all of you folks listening, or maybe the new ones tuning in, what the Executive Policy Committee is. It is the mayor's inner circle. It is himself and I believe 6 other councillors representing wards from all over the city. And these are the folks who review motions and policies and everything else before the rest of City Council and before the public. It is a committee where you can sign up to get delegate, and many of our friends did. And the motion that was sort of the hot button topic, there were 2. There was the Wellington Crescent permanent bike lane versus temporary bike lane motion project. And there was the lowering the speed limits in the city. And I will couch that by saying they were not voting on lowering the speed limit. They were voting on, should we ask the province permission if we can lower the speed limit? And there was a lot of really fun things that came out of some councillors' mouths that just going to live on in infamy, especially in this episode. We don't want to rehash the whole thing, even though we did spend hours watching it once again, because we love suffering. So I actually want to start off with Catherine's delegation. We're not going to play the whole thing here, but to summarize, she lives on Wellington Crescent and has been there for, around 15 years. So she is a resident in the area where the proposed bike lane has been, like the pilot plan has been put from Academy to Stradbrook. And she has been biking year-round for 5 years. That's all 4 seasons. She supports the Walk Bike pilot project. She went to the Public Works meeting prior to the Executive Policy Committee meeting, and she noticed these things. Basically, none of the delegates supported skipping the pilot. Almost everyone who spoke, again, delegates coming up to talk to the council, almost everyone supported doing the pilot first for safety reasons. She said no one ever demanded a $5.5 million bike lane right away. People, generally the community, who were responding and very involved in this motion, they were fine with the pilot. They were like, great, look at that. Oh my God, a real piece of infrastructure. Like we're a real city. And the $5.5 million that has been tossed around and was tossed around a lot at EPC, that number, it isn't the price tag for just a fancy bike lane. It's for tearing up the boulevard, moving fire hydrants, poles, bus stops, utility boxes, etc., messing with private driveways, including Catherine's, who is speaking on this delegation. It was also for cutting trees, paving over routes. And all of those things, don't they sound like a giant headache if they're rushed? Which is what Councillor Lukes is sort of proposing, that they rush right to permanent for this $5.5 million price tag. And again, to remind you, the community was like, you don't have to do that. You can just do the temporary one. We're okay with that. But for some reason, and she noted tons of them that were sort of nonsensical and did not come from the community, she thinks it's the best move. So Catherine, back to her delegation, she thinks there's 2 possible outcomes of the pilot. Traffic becomes a disaster, proving that we need the boulevard space for a permanent solution, or the most likely one, in my humble suburban mom opinion. Traffic is fine, like the experts predict, because they're the experts, and because people adjust their habits, making it easier and cheaper to build something permanent later. You gather the data. Based on that data, you make changes. That's what a pilot is for. That's what the public service said over and over, but doesn't really seem like the people making the decisions were listening. And if traffic turns out to be minor, permanent changes might only require shifting the curb a little bit and replacing the plastic posts with something a little hardier. Janice Lukes she had a bee in her bonnet about plastic posts, and plastic posts suck, et cetera, even though in previous meetings, and we could dig up the clips, she just loves plastic posts. So she had a bad dream, I guess, about plastic posts. And the pilot, like we've said many times, it lets people make decisions based on real evidence, not guesses. And canceling the pilot now, which it really seems like it has been, would just be unsafe. It would just continue to make this 1.5 kilometer stretch just like a freeway. Bad for public trust because of how many times the public has had to engage in this conversation about this one frickin' thing. Be a poor financial decision because they have the materials in a warehouse and it would be a fraction of cost to just get the temporary in. And overall, rushing to a permanent design is reckless. And that's not just some opinion. That's a reality that has occurred in other cities. That's why they favor temporary. And in the urbanist elite community, we have a saying: we would rather have a city full of pilot lanes than a patchwork network of permanent, which you could argue that we already have, but we actually have a patchwork network of temporary.
Yes, we do.
So we're going to play you a clip right now.
Yes, so this is the clip of what happened right after Catherine's delegation.
Are there any questions at all? Councillor Duncan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so interestingly enough, we have groups here for Centre Plan that, need approximately $7 million for the downtown reinvestment into infrastructure. So what I'm hearing from you is that you want the temporary plan because you're not confident that the city can implement the permanent plan. Would you support shifting that money over to Centre Plan and just having them have all that cash? Because do you see where we're at here? It's a pull, pull, pull. Nobody's getting their way. So, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's literally my point, that we have $400,000 plan. We have the materials. We have the plan. It was all ready to go last year. It's all ready to go this year.
Yeah.
And maybe, I ride permanent or temporary bike infrastructure to work every day. The Westminster bike lanes, they've existed for going on 5 years. They're going to exist for, I think, at least another 5 years as is. Bannatyne, I believe those are 10 years, going on 10 years old now. They're temporary. And again, it happens that people get so riled up when you talk about putting these things in. And then we put them in. And again, like Portage and Main, it's like, oh, it's fine. Yes. And so, if it turns out that 400,000 is all we need for safety on Wellington Crescent, give that $5 million to Centre Point, give it to Splash Pad, give it to bike lanes. And Councillor Santos, I know that, you really need infrastructure, and you're like,
That's fair. I did not know that would be your perspective, but I respect
that's
that.
what I'm trying to explain. Yeah, and I know that people, people will have the impression of, the radical bike lobby, demanding and saying this, but no, I'm saying let's make some reasonable decisions that make sense financially.
I'm genuine, Mr. Mayor, I'm genuinely surprised that you wouldn't want the permanent infrastructure, but if it's the temporary infrastructure, and that's your point, I'm very clear on that.
I'm genuinely surprised because I was sleeping when they were saying all these things all the time. I'm genuinely surprised because every time someone comes up to say it, they say, give me the temporary, use the money for something else. I am shocked, Mr. Mayor. You realize it's a game of pull, pull, pull. Pull,
Oh my God.
pull some more. I'm sorry.
Patty, it's like Councillor Duncan was in the room with us for a second there.
Me.
Did you? I don't remember doing a seance to let that in this room. But
I'm
it is
sorry,
ridiculous.
but I just blows my
No,
mind that
it
they
is-
can make it sound like they didn't hear anything
Okay.
we've been saying for 2 years.
It is real, yes. And again, that this, oh, I'm genuinely surprised in such a mocking, condescending, you people don't know what you want, when in fact the people making the decision have no clear concept. And it is just sort of like the delegates are being very clear. We want this temporary, like, and we're actually just sort of existing in this dimension, like, are we just not saying the right words? And the thing is that, not to get too head shrinky, this is what happens when you're in a toxic relationship. The person who's got all the power and is pulling all the strings, they just cannot have anything new come in. They have their preconceived bias. They don't want to accept new information because it would misalign with their identity. And that's, I guess, blocking infrastructure for cheaper so that, yeah, you can stop saying we don't have enough money for things, when delegates are like, you could though. You could take that $5 million and you could apply that to maybe the road safety budget that was just cut, or to splash pads. Like, you spent all this time demolishing pools and saying, we're going to put splash pads in, and then changing your mind. That speaks again to lack of public trust. Why bother delegating if they're just not going to listen and they're going to make the decision anyway?
So there's Catherine delegating. She's a resident. She's not a city planner. But here's the thing. Next up, we're going to play a clip, and please stay with us. It is Richard Milgrom. He's associate professor at the Department of City Planning at the University of Manitoba. I want you to hear what he has to say, but I want you to understand one thing. This is not the first time he's saying these exact words. So let's see what our dear Professor Milgrom has to say.
So for those of you who don't know me very well, I mean, I've been an academic for 25 years. I've been a planning academic, and my main interest is community engagement. And I know that you guys have a difficult job. I know there's lots of things going on, but this process around Wellington Crescent has been sort of a poster child of all the things that can go wrong in a good community process. And I'm here to speak mostly, again, as others have, that to emphasize the need to have the pilot project. Councillor Lukes has said at other meetings, I think actually at the EPC where we first delayed the pilot project, or where you first delayed the pilot project, that we have to get the pilot project right because it might be in place for 2 to 7 to 9 or whatever years. Councillor Lukes usually takes the numbers up as she goes. The $5 million question, I'm just going to address before it comes to me. I would be in favor of using the $5 million to do 12 other temporary things now at the same time that we do this one. Because temporary projects stay in place for 2 to 5 to 7 years, and they would all help. So let's use it for what we want it for. I'm going to use some of your own words to make an argument against you, and I apologize for that. It's just the way this works, right? So when this project was originally, we were chugging along. I mean, unfortunately, after the death of Rob Jenner, there was this push to get something done on Wellington. There was an initial push to have a pilot project. And then at some point in the future, maybe 29, we would have a permanent project. At that first EPC meeting, I think that was in July, there was a push to have more consultation before we do the pilot project. And it's a little bit, this is where others have said you haven't been listening to your public service and your planners, because they've said all along the pilot project is the consultation. And even though, Councillor Lukes, you just said we're going to continue the consultation, but you're not going to continue meaningful consultation because people will not experience what the changes are. And it doesn't matter how many drawings you do, people don't understand them, they don't experience them, they don't know. So at that same meeting, with apologies, Mr. Mayor, you said we need to do the consultation because we need to get it right because we don't want to just have to rip it out. I felt like saying, are you aware of that moment? Pilot projects are meant to be ripped out, but they can also be tweaked along the way. If something isn't quite working, you can make it right. I'm going to come back to that. Councillor Lukes, when we got to the meeting, the Public Works meeting, whenever it was, a couple of weeks ago, you said, and I agree with this completely, that people don't really know something's going on until the bulldozers are on the site. And what we really need is an enhanced public engagement campaign. Your words. A pilot project is an engaged public awareness campaign. It is the best public engagement campaign. Signs will do nothing. The only people who read signs are planning nerds. I'm a proud planning nerd. There's probably other proud planning nerds up there. Signs don't do it. That's not public engagement. We don't know what's going to happen in the long run. We really don't. But, you know, there's going to be an election. Who knows what's going to happen? Had we done what we were originally going to do, if we had stuck to the first schedule, we would be now meeting to talk about the results of the pilot project, because that was the timeline. And now we're talking about canceling the pilot project altogether and continuing less than ideal public consultation. The pilot project, quick responses to safety concerns, well, that hasn't happened. The budget's already allocated. The materials are sitting there waiting for someone to put them out. Plus, we would get an enhanced public awareness campaign, and we would get really well-informed public feedback. And for those of you who are concerned that the silent majority isn't being heard, they are more likely to respond to a pilot project than they are to an advertisement in the newspaper or a map in the back of a committee report. No pilot project means another year with no bike lane. It means a lack of informed feedback and no chance to adjust the scheme as we go. Oh, to go back to the mayor's comment about we want to get it right because we don't want to rip it out. The way to get it, the best chance of getting it right is to have the pilot project.
If I could drop this mic and walk away, there's nothing else to say. He said all the things. He said everything. We could be discussing the results.
That's a qualified person, listener. That's literally his whole job in life.
His whole job is just that. Nothing else. Nothing else. We could be discussing the results of the pilot right now. I don't know what's going on. I really, really don't know what's going on. But before we discuss anymore, I want to play one more clip because there's been a lot of calls coming in. And so there's one here I'd like to play, which is related to this as well.
Correct.
Let's see what this caller had to say.
Hey, Ballot Babes. Calling in with kudos on your transit episode. I liked how you broke down just how easy it is to give feedback to the city, both bad and good. And who am I? Well, I'm one of the 60 and 70-year-olds who Scott Gillingham says he's not making changes on Wellington Crescent for. I think maybe he accidentally said the quiet part out loud. Anyway, great job. Keep it up. Thanks a lot.
Well, what's he talking about?
Yeah, wouldn't that be such a crazy thing for your mayor to say?
What did the mayor say? Do we know what the mayor said?
It seems like he is saying something about a big swath of his votership who are seniors and about seniors and infrastructure. So maybe we should listen to it from the mayor himself.
Yes, we should. Well, thank you so much for calling in, caller. We really appreciate you. I don't care what the mayor says about you. What is the mayor talking about? So I suggest that you grab your pillow, my friends. You're going to need something to scream into, especially if you are over the age of 60.
I've had some conversations with a group that are in their late 20s, early 30s. This is the kind of infrastructure they want for their city in the future. And we're making these decisions not for the 60, 70-year-olds. No disrespect, because a lot of them do use these facilities, but we're trying to make the decisions what infrastructure is needed for the 30-year-olds, the 25-year-olds, and that future generation. And the people I've spoken to in that age bracket, this is the kind of permanent infrastructure, like you say, Mr. Berezowski, that kind of optimizes the traffic flow and all modes. And so I think, you know, for me, my eye is on that population as well.
Okay, so when someone disrespects me and then says no disrespect, it's the equivalent of a driver who hits me on the road because they didn't see me and then they give me a wave. Sorry, I didn't see you, right? In case you're wondering, Rob Jenner, the man who was killed on Wellington Crescent, was 61 years old. So I want you to pay very close attention to this one detail about this bike lane discussion that just won't end. The major difference between the temporary and permanent designs are that the temporary takes 2 lanes away from cars, 1 each way. And the permanent, allegedly, because we haven't seen it, doesn't take any lanes away from cars. More lanes equals more speed. So fewer lanes means drivers have to slow down because the design of the road forces them to slow down. So when they say that they don't want the temporary design, it is because that would slow down traffic on Wellington Crescent. And God forbid we inconvenience drivers by making their drive a few seconds longer than it is. They keep saying that Rob Jenner wouldn't have been saved by a bike lane there, but a road with fewer lanes makes it difficult to speed just by way of design. So please stop saying that. It's insulting to our intelligence. It is so insulting to say that you are not taking into consideration the seniors in the room, the seniors who are asking for safety because you want to build the bike lanes for the 20 and 30-year-olds. When the 20 and 30-year-olds have been delegating and telling you what they want. Well, who are you talking to? Who are these 20 and 30-year-olds? Let me at them. Let me at them. Let me talk to them.
Also, just the way that the mayor took this moment to give a little speech. And I'm sure in his mind, it was a way to pontificate about, oh, you know, I am listening. I am paying attention. And when
I'm in touch with the cool kids.
But he didn't have to bring age into it at all. The reality is, in his mind, he means drivers. He means we're not building this bike lane for drivers or people who primarily drive or the people who are vocally, I'm sorry, they're the silent majority, silently against bike lanes. Maybe he's referring to a Facebook comment section. I don't really know, because the silent majority, who he seems to be saying, we're not talking about this for their sake, they don't engage with this process anyway. Like you said, Patty, they're not showing up in force to delegate, to say, we don't want this bike lane, and here's why. It's really the complete opposite. The people who are engaged and who are desperate to make these points, like Professor Milgrom, like Catherine, like everyday Joe and Jane lunchboxes who are telling him what they want. Again, really not listening, really tone deaf. And also, I guess that when I turn 60, I have to take my bike and throw it into a trash compactor because the infrastructure isn't made for me when I get that age, apparently. Despite the fact that numerous people in the active transportation community are over the age of 60 because they want to stay active.
It's not very reasonable to want to stay active, and it's not rational. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Other thing, this is a good segue into the next subject. The next thing that was discussed at this meeting was the speed pilot project. The councillors were voting on whether to ask the province to make a blanket change in speed, lowering the default speeds to 40 kilometers an hour. Passing this motion here doesn't mean that all speeds are lowered. All it means is that we can now pass the buck onto the province and ask them to lower speeds, which then saves the city some money because they don't need to put signs everywhere. It just, we don't have signs saying that our default speeds are 50 everywhere. It just says that once at the perimeter entrance to the city, and that's it. We just know that it's 50 unless otherwise stated, right? But before they voted on this, my city councillor, Jeff Broati, said this.
I am 100% opposed to doing this. This is a huge mistake. If we're asking the province for permission to do this, we're going to lower speed limits on residential streets, on local collector streets. This is not where Winnipeggers want us to go. Again, we're talking about 40 in this report, but if we ask for permission to have this power, what's stopping us from doing 30? People who've been coming and speaking in the gallery that don't represent the average soccer mom, the average person trying to get to hockey practice, they're not representative. They don't want the speed limit to be lowered to 30 or 40. So again, if we vote in favor of this today, we are basically asking the province to let us lower the speed limits on those residential streets. And again, we have the power today. Like if there are certain streets where we want to lower the speed limit, we have the ability to do it today. It just requires excessive signing.
Yeah. Oh, you know what I'm really excited for? When the city asks the province for something and gives them a ton of evidence and a ton of like commentary, and the province is like, no. And now frustrated. They're going to be.
Yeah. He's getting excited for nothing. That's not going to happen. But he goes on to say that lowering speeds to 40 is unnecessary and impractical because these roads were originally designed for higher speeds and drivers should already be adjusting to conditions. So it really saying it should be up to drivers. They should slow down if it's icy or nearby children. He also questions whether police resources should be diverted to enforce new lower limits when we face more pressing issues like retail and drug-related crime. Instead, he recommends modernizing photo radar technology, which actually I am in favor of, so we agree there. And he goes on to just say a bunch of stuff about artificial low limits. It's illogical and frustrating, and it's what he called bubble wrapping. I don't even know what that means. But then he's not done. He delivers his final blow. Let's see what he says. I just can't listen to the man this whole time, so I had to paraphrase. Excuse me.
Again, I'm not opposed to sidewalks, active transportation lanes, where they make sense. We have the advantage in Winnipeg of being a flat city. You don't need to be in super great shape to be able to ride a bike to work. Where these pieces of infrastructure make sense, let's do them. But they are still the minority. Where it doesn't make sense, anything in the winter. Why do we clear active transportation paths when they're beside sidewalks when there's almost nobody that uses them? Huge waste of money, in my opinion. How about seasonal snow routes or seasonal bike routes? People, logical, rational people can ride their bikes to work in the summer, but then they could take the bus or drive in the winter. Again, I strongly encourage everybody around this table to vote against this request to the province. It's a slippery slope. It's going to lead to slower speed limits. It's going to lead to angry residents. It's going to lead to senior citizens that are on fixed incomes getting ridiculously high speeding tickets when they're doing exactly what these roads were engineered for.
Good.
The vehicles have gotten safer over the years. The technology has improved.
Wow.
So much to say.
I mean, Patty, we cannot risk angry citizens coming to City Hall because it would just be more people we don't listen to. It would just be crazy to create more volume of that. I am in favor of sidewalks because pedestrians stay over there. Stay out of my face. Don't come anywhere near my car. There's, like you said, there were so many gems in there. And just, it was,
hands off, because he's all mine. He's all mine.
Oh.
He's my sitting councillor. And he thinks I'm not logical nor reasonable or whatever words he used,
And this is not the first time he's gone off about this. He goes off about speed limits whenever there is a chance, even when it's something else is being discussed. I have heard this man say numerous times it's the driver's responsibility to modulate their speed. However, in this little speech earlier on in the clip that we didn't play, he is against driving 30 in a school zone when there's no one around, because I guess drivers don't need the practice to adhere to a posted speed limit, and they need every cheat code they can get to get from A to B so that they won't be so mad that they'll fill up his inbox. And I loved the dig about how it's a waste of money to clear active transportation routes in the winter. A season that lasts here for 6 months. It's a waste of time. Only psychos are riding their bikes in the winter.
Absolutely.
And we shouldn't be spending any money on them. And also, let's not give traffic tickets to people who deserve them, because that possibly couldn't fund other things.
He actually took some time this week to write to me. Did you know that?
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
he's very responsive actually, but here's what he said to me. I'm going to read you guys just one paragraph because again, I hear his voice in my head and I just don't want to hear it. But
And
I
you know
wrote
what?
to him saying,
One paragraph out of the 6-paragraph essay that he wrote to you is quite enough,
yes,
I think. Yeah.
it is. Yeah, well, I had said to him that I do support the lower speeds because, my street where I live, I see people cutting through all the time. And what he said in response was, you live on a street designed for motor vehicle traffic. While you accuse traffic of cutting through, they have every right to use the streets. I think they pay more taxes than me or something, right? I get a discount because I don't use the street. Yeah, I get a discount.
Yeah. Yeah,
They
you get a
were
credit.
there. They were there before you moved in, so I'm a little worried you're complaining about it right after moving in. You really should have done your homework. We spend a lot of money on plowing streets and sidewalks, and I do not support raising the standard any higher for a tiny number of people that feel they have the right to ride their bicycles year-round at great expense per rider. More taxpayers are upset their tip payments go to bike lanes and bike lane winter plowing than almost anything else at great expense per rider. My property taxes should not go to make my life safer. It should only
No.
go to make roads faster.
For
And
drivers.
people who complain, yes, drivers driving faster, yes, but people who complain about potholes shouldn't be complaining about lower speeds then, because higher speeds create more potholes, but that's a lesson for another day. Yeah, so this is my counselor. You did your homework, listeners, so you already know who your counselor is, correct? Are you paying attention, though, to what they are saying? I am paying attention because it's right here in my face. Are you paying attention? We need to talk about these meetings that happen at the community level, because we've been exploring sort of the latest, the final meetings, but where everything starts is the community level meetings. So if you did your homework from episode 1, you know who your counselor is and what ward you belong to. In City Hall, all discussions and decisions usually start at the community meeting level. And there are 3 wards inside one community. For example, the city center community comprises River Heights, Daniel McIntyre, and Fort Rouge. That's one. So that's councilors Orlico, Gilroy, and Rollins. So your homework this week is to find out which community meeting you belong to or your issues are going to be raised at and when the next one is. Because the way it works is there's a collection of meetings and it starts community level, then it comes all together for a final council level where the final decisions are made. Correct?
Correct. And those are the kind of meetings where you, in North Kildonan, Jeff Brawati's ward, you can say, hey, bud, actually, I don't agree with anything you're saying. And it is really interesting, isn't it, that Patty, you took the time to reach out to him and to say, I'm paying attention to what you're saying. And his response was a very long, drawn out, lashing out at you, one of his constituents. And the core message of his reply back to you was, I don't care that you're one of my constituents. You're not the one that I'm serving. There's a swath of people who complain louder or whose opinions I agree with. And those are the ones who I'm going to represent when I sit in my seat on the EPC and largely on the city council. And in the same nature that we told you at the beginning that we are watching closely what these councilors say, we're watching how they speak to the people who come and take their time and swallow their anxiety and tell them they don't like how things are going. And you either get patted on the head or you get flat out ignored. And that's why people are annoyed about a lot of things in the city, not just 2 broads, who happened to pick up a microphone and try and voice it. And I also want to say, listener, that for that little speech that Jeff Burwadi made saying, I don't want to slow people down, everyone else on EPC voted the opposite. He was the only
Yes.
voice of dissension in that group. Some of them, said, I am going to vote in favor because I don't really know what's going to happen in the province. Evan Duncan said, I'm only voting to see what happens. I don't have any, stake in this. The mayor himself said, I want to be clear. I'm not voting for lowering the speed limits today. I'm voting for the chance to ask the province's permission to change the speed limits. So, and also in there, I would have to say Councillor Santos, she made a lot of comments and things that made me go, oh, now I actually know what she cares about. And she is really interested in, she said herself, she is in support of 30 kilometers on residential roads in the same fashion that many other Canadian and North American cities have adopted. And I learned something about her that day. So councillors use all of these opportunities to platform themselves and to make it very clear what they stand for. And that is what you need to be paying attention to in these meetings.
Absolutely. And there's no better way to pay attention than to come back here every week and see what we have digested for you, what we have chewed up and cut up.
What we chewed up and the product
cut up
that's
into
come out,
tiny little pieces for you to see.
and just spat it back to you like a political baby bird. And we are
You know what,
making
though?
it
I
more
have to say,
palatable.
I have been following Councillor Cindy Gilroy on social media, and she is killing the social media game. She is posting about her transit rides. She takes transit everywhere she goes. She does these little reels explaining how things work at City Hall. It's like, I know that she's campaigning, but this is a great way to campaign, is to explain to her constituents how things work. And I wish more councillors would do that. I feel like maybe I should let Jeffy know that what's going to happen is this. This is what's going to happen. I am going to find out who is running in this next election. And I'm going to find out who cares about everyone that wants to ride their bikes year round, that wants safe streets and quiet streets. And there wants their kids to be able to just cross the street to play with their friends. I'm going to find out. And then I'm going to support them. And I'm going to get a lot of my friends to support them as well by door knocking, by talking to people. I was thinking, well, maybe I should gather some signatures and he'll understand, in the neighborhood. He'll understand how many people want this and how he's out of touch. But if I'm going to knock on doors, I'm not doing it for him. I'm doing it for someone else.
And when's the next time that we can see City Council in person, front and center, in the great arena?
It's so exciting because remember, I'm taking the day off. I am going to be there watching. I'm going to bring my knitting. I'm going to bring my popcorn, and I'm going to spend the day at City Hall on March 26th. That's this Thursday. Please join me there. Just sit in the gallery with me.
Yeah. And yeah, you should get in there. And then you can see all of them at once. And you should get in there before the security gets a little crazier, because I'm not sure if anyone here has been paying attention to the news, but they are changing up the way that they allow the public to engage in the most democratic process that our municipal government has.
Doesn't that cost money? Isn't that operating costs that we don't have money for?
It's, I don't know, somewhere in the $246,000 range. But, the front doors were at the end of their lives, and people are getting really rowdy in the gallery. So they've got to do some upgrades. Yes, they're getting so rowdy because it's almost as if council isn't listening to anything that anyone says. And that when you have a little emotional outburst, saying that basically the equivalent of someone softly saying, come on, you got to sick 3 security guards on them. I digress. But you know what? I'm sure we're selling it. It is really just a wonderful show that I really want. I want more people to be aware and know that they can get involved and that your feelings matter, because this is your city.
And remember, North Kildonan, Jeff Burwadi works for you.
And this October, tell your babe and your babe's babe and your grandma's babe to vote.
Bye.